Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Collective podcast. I'm your host, Sasha, and today I'm once again met with Dr. Cassie Wuthrich, who used to be Dr. Cassie Huckaby. So for you followers of her, you're going to be looking for a new name. We are excited today. I am super excited today because I've been actually wanting to do another interview with Dr. Cassie for a few years now, and she's finally opened herself up to new interviews. And I am very honored to be here with her because, like I said before in my intro before with Dr. Cassie, is that she's got wisdom beyond her years, but I think even more so now going through the last 4 years. And it was 4 years ago that I did the first interview with Dr. Cassie, and that was episode 23. So if you want to know her beginning, her story, how she got to doing what is doing now, and the pain that she went through and the healing she went through, I know a lot of people out there have some healing to do and want to do. Well, Dr. Cassie has done it. And so this is what puts her in that great place of wisdom to help share her story and the stories of so many others that she has worked with. So who is she? Let's just read this quickly. Dr. Cassie Wuthrich is a naturopathic physician, speaker, and founder of Grit Inc. Through her own journey of healing the impossible, working with many patients that had tried it all in both the allopathic and naturopathic worlds without success, she discovered unshakable truths that she now utilizes through her medicine and online classes to help others realize their true potential and optimal health, and ultimately shows them how to obtain freedom from the medical system. Amen. Dr. Cassie's passion is to provide medicine that heals and education that demystifies healing. Her medicine weaves together the modern world of quantum medicine with the unchangeable truths held in ancient wisdom. She helps her clients understand the language of their body through a deep listening and understanding of how all things, including the mind, actions, neurology, relationships, heart, and soul, impact the physical body. She focuses on all that encompasses the human being and believes that with true understanding, truth, and grit, there's that great word again, you can do what most say is impossible. Above all, she believes, lives, and teaches that your life is your medicine. And this is going to be a big part of what we talk about today because I think there's some clarifying to do. And you had a clarifying video on what that means is that your medicine is your life. But there's just some words in there that I love. Like even the simple word is listen. Listen. How many people are listening to what their body is telling them, the signs that it is giving them, the signs that the circumstances of their lives are giving them. And Dr. Cassie's approach is so whole, right? It's not, there's no specializing, there's no one single element that is going to heal the you, because the you comes from the wholeness of everything that's influencing that has brought you here to this day. And I think Dr. Cassie is the one that best puts words to that and feeling to that. And I know you're going to feel that today. So thank you, Dr. Cassie, for being with me today. I'm very, very honored to have you back.
I'm so honored to be here. This is my first one back. I chose it on purpose, very much on purpose. So I'm excited to continue the conversation we had. I can't believe it's 4 years ago.
I know.
But I love it. So let's jump in and let's bring everyone else in that's going to join us in this time and space, no matter when that hits and when that becomes available. But yeah, let's make this time worth it and make it medicine.
Thank you. Medicine. And that's the thing, medicine is found when you choose it, it's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. So we were just quickly talking, and I don't know what you want to share about the last 4 years, but they're even following you online. We can tell that your life has changed a lot and that you've been through a lot of different things. So what has changed for you since we talked 4 years ago? Because even back then, I'm sure a lot of what you were saying back then is still the same, but I'm sure you're bringing a deeper depth, if that makes any sense, to it. So What?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one of the most beautiful things, and that's why this medicine, it just makes me fall in love with it over and over again. Because everything that I utilized back when I was given those incurable words, those autoimmune conditions, everything that I used to change my physiology and my biochemistry and everything I've used with working with other patients, those things stand true. Those things will always be the medicine that provide that foundation to your physiology, even when, as many do, when you move past the changing of your physical body, you often come to a center clearing and like there's a peaceful time. And then it's like all of the emotional things, all of the attachment elements, all of the past traumas, all of those things that didn't have a place to be truly worked through now rise to the surface, right? And you can use the onion analogy or whatever you want. But it truly is that. And the thing about when you utilize your life as your medicine in a way that's sustaining who you are, those elements that held you back then come back and fortify you in a new way, but it's the same way of living. And then you just utilize those components, those inputs in a way that nourishes in different doses, if you will. So everything that you use to change your physical body will be what now holds your tissues, your physiology, your neurology to be able to process change and apply different levels of wisdom to the life. And then that feeds back and becomes a totally different chemical that's going to be in circulation in your blood, and that medicine will just completely change physiology even more as you move through these things. And so that was, definitely in my life too, working with a lot of patients. We got to a point where, the practice, most of my patients were people that had gone through both sides, natural and allopathic, and either met dead ends or were just so covered up in substances, supplements, pharmaceutical drugs. And so they kind of came, we jokingly called it the Wild West, came to the Wild West where we had to make changes that are kind of outside that world of just changing your diet, doing all of those things with the understanding that those things matter too. And I think there for a while that kind of got lost in translation with the message was all of those things, everything matters. So from the quality of your food to your relationships to your community, to everything pulsing inside you because of every interaction that you have with every relationship, with every stranger, with everything in the news, with everything. So there's nothing that you can't consider when you're working with a human body because everything is interfacing with your body. That's one of the most magnificent things, but that's also what makes it extremely complex when you're trying to change something in your body. And so this again just got reiterated in a deeper way. And we spoke kind of earlier about how I feel like a lot of women or a lot of, men too, but more specifically women, because that was predominantly the population that I worked with. You go through that changing your physiology, and then life says, okay, these were the things actually governing how you were experiencing your life. And now this is the level we're going to work on. And
Right.
so sometimes we're like, no, but I feel fine and I look great and
Right.
my hair is thick and my skin is glowing. Why are we going to start excavating things that I didn't even know about? I just want to feel good. But I
Oh,
think that that's part of life being like, but until we change this, you really have to go in and micromanage, what I've called to simplify the rules. The more strict you have to be on those things, that means the more you're fighting a component of you because ease is the name of this game, right? Abundance is the name of this beautiful game. Life wants you to feel good just as badly as you want to, but sometimes we have to go in there and we learn through experiences, right? You don't know until you know. Wisdom has to replace innocence. Wisdom has to replace naivete. It has to come in there and wash into your actual biochemistry, and then it creates that personality that starts contributing more to your physiology and your biochemistry than the previous one before, the one that was very reactive, the one that would fall for anything, the one that was gullible. And so it's this changing of you that actually starts making your physiology even more resilient. And when you do that at the same time, simultaneously as following those rules that your body has to, abide by. I joke around all the time, like, 3 shots of tequila is going to do in a body what 3 shots of tequila does.
Right.
Is there a place where we can start utilizing the powers of the mind? Absolutely. But when you're in a time of healing, that's not the time to, go rely on something that's a little bit further outside of your control. And so all of this came crashing in again in the past 4 years with relationships, with professional things going on. And, I finally just got to a place where even just going back to my maiden name, not out of anything other than just a beautiful reclamation of me, my medicine, my life's work, my words, this gift that I've been given. Because again, I'm not the creator, but I am a vessel. And, I went through a period of time where I let outside influences kind of interpret, and this is going to be one thing we talk about even with the body, the difference between translation and interpretation is a very powerful difference. So when you allow everything outside you to translate you or translate all of these different things, you are not going to get the true message, because the true message comes not just from a literal translation, but an interpretation which requires you,
Right.
your perspective,
Yeah.
your heartbeat, your experiences.
Mm.
And so, even when you just put that on language, there's a difference between a direct translation, which is what we see in the medical industry, right? These, diagnostic factors mean this, and this means this.
Right.
That's a direct, translation. What's left, and where we have so much that's being missed, especially for the population that includes, the female physiology, it's why we're not the funnest for them to study in medical research, is there's so much of interpretation when it comes to the physical body, because we could put the same stimulus in front of you and I, and we would have two totally different
Yeah.
reactions, right? And so when we talk reactions, the reactions matter. Why? Because that's what's in circulation in your blood. And so when we talk about individual medicine, when we talk about your life is your medicine, that's why the number one thing that we have to pay attention to in that whole phrase is you. You are the most important thing, because we could translate you all day and maybe we'd have a 50-50 shot about being right about something, right? But there's a difference between being right and being true. And
Mm.
sometimes those two things coincide and sometimes they do not at all. And
Right.
to have that understanding really starts reworking and restructuring how we investigate a life, how we investigate health and healing. Because, you can break it all down, but to go as simply as we can, you should eat differently when you're sad than when you're happy.
Mm.
Right. And it's not because your body is wrong in either state, it's because your body changes in both states. And so this was kind of what I came into. And then when I came into this past 4 years of just radical life change and stress and everything just really coming in, and then my personal relationships turned out to be something totally different than what they appeared to be. And so it was like my whole life really had a purification, and I had to, allow it all over again. Kind of, it's almost like that. Holographic mirror thing where, back when I found this medicine, I had to give up thinking I knew anything in medicine to be available for this. And
Mm.
then I
Right.
found myself in another chapter of life that I had to give up everything that I thought it was to allow the peace of just acknowledging the truth of what it was. And that's a process, right? That's
Really.
work.
That
Um,
work, and that takes a lot of willingness. And I think a lot of people aren't there to be even willing to feel, to see, to question, to realize that they might have had it wrong, right? There's that willingness piece is such a big piece of all of this, because I love what you say, nothing changes until you change. I'm pretty sure I heard
yeah,
you say that first.
yeah.
And people like staying the same.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's a lot to it, because the more I worked with people, in the beginning when I was, more, I wasn't as aware of all of the little things that come into a life. But the more you spend time talking to lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds with lots of different, we'll just say healing responses or conditions in their physiology, the more you see how even in that unwillingness is a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
is even a neurological strategy to feel safe. And so if you don't have the capacity to detect for those things, you often correct for something that that person was relying on as maybe their sole sense of security. And so this is why, again, this is a big thing because we get a lot of um, translation again from experts, from medicine, from everybody outside us, telling us what it is, right? You lack willpower, you're lazy, you're all of these different things. But the only way we could actually know the truth of any of that is to go, from that internal perspective of interpreting all of these things, right? What must it mean? And when we ask a different level of question, when we ask from a different premise, we often get a truer answer, and then we have something to actually do with that. And so when I just zoom out and watch, society and watch people and watch myself and watch the tendency of, our own neurology and bodies, you see that it's really pushed on you to play with all these little tiny details so that you feel like you're changing when the actual foundation is not being altered at all. And so again, it's this, you're going to have to get into the whole life of a person to truly understand why aren't you willing to change? And then even change our language of, it's probably not that you're not willing, it's that we also have to understand with change, every type of change. And this was like a big thing that squeezed out of my soul this past few years. All of change involves loss.
Oh,
And the more profound the change, the more profound the loss. And when we're in a time like, again, you and I were sitting here again in another pivotal time, um, there's so much loss and uncertainty and fear just bathing us. And so, if you have not created resiliency within your physiology through doing those things that we talk about, I talk about the practical and the poetic. The practical is doing those things within your grasp, like I teach in the master classes, the light, the nutrition, all of those things that truly, truly, truly matter, not the diet. Remember, there's a difference between digesting food and choosing a restrictive diet, right? And
right,
so again, we go to the truths of those things, what actually communicates to physiology to create a safety within your physiology. And then we can start, with our choice and with our attention, looking into the external world and saying we won't allow that in because we don't have the capacity to do so, because it's really an energy maintenance game. The more you give your attention to things that you have no control over, that actually starts becoming part of the chemistry in your circulation, fear, anxiety, worry. And then we're saying, we need you to change your life.
right.
So yeah, um, maybe later, but
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much. And so it's one of these things where, in the beginning, even with my own family, I'd be like so overzealous and so excited and be like, if we did this and this and this and this, and I could map it out and be like, this is what your physiology is going to do. And then this is going to turn into this. And then this is going to stay in circulation. And then your tissues are going to change. And it sounds so simple. But you get into the actual life and it's like, okay, but I can't do that. And it's like, yes, you can. No, but you would have to ask questions that would reveal a truth that often, from my experience, people don't want you opening those doors because there's something behind it that they're not quite ready to deal with, to admit, to acknowledge. And then what happens sometimes, just kind of like my past 4 years, is sometimes all of those doors get blown open. And you're like, hey, I was not ready. And life says, yes, you were, or I wouldn't have opened them all.
Exactly.
Right. And
Yeah.
so then again, I always like try to simplify everything down. So no matter if you're in a time of massive chaos within your physiology, that has to be your primary focus, because you cannot go into traumas and you are light years away from altering anything in society, in our communities, much less the world, if you in your physiology is not regulated, is not centered, is not a safe place physiologically, because the body has lots of inputs. You are the biggest input. So if you are not conferring safety through, following the rules of the planet that you're on, right? We can't just say the whole world is the problem. We've got to start right where we're at, strengthen, fortify, and then when those things come, yes, you're rocked, but you are not rocked to your core. That's
Right.
where we talk about you don't go into remission, right? And then you have a relapse. If you have a relapse, that means the physiology wasn't quite to the point where it could hold, right? So you were still playing that management game. And so it should be that you get to a point where the physiology is robust again, adaptable, flexible. And when you're in that state, after you really do all of the things that are required for tissues to heal and change and nourish and hydrate and all of those different things, then you get to that place where you have a different, more robust physiology that can then start working on what we kind of classify as the mind or the nervous system and doing that work. But if you jump the gun and try to do nervous system work when the physiology doesn't have the safety woven into it, that's where you start just creating more chaos in the body because it's like, I'm not safe enough to do that.
Mm,
Like, I'm not safe enough to go decorate a home or clean out a closet because I feel like somebody's going to invade my front door. And so, this is how the person has to be looked at. And then anytime you're in these chaotic times, instead of being like, I've got to rebuild a whole house, or it's just the way I see it always is now we got to clean up. We found another mess and we clean it up. And it really is that. It's you've been given a mansion, you've been given your dream home, right? You've been given your dream body. Sometimes there's a mess in it. And then all you have to do is clean it up. And then if a mess ever gets reintroduced in it, it's never that you messed up or you failed or you were supposed to do it in this way and you did it wrong. It's that no, a mess is in your house. Was it your fault? Probably not, but that's not even the word that I like to investigate. More importantly, whose responsibility is it now to clean it up,
right.
right? It's my responsibility. And so that's often what happens after you go through that physiological healing is then you move into that more emotional, psychological, mental part of what is communicating and dancing with your physiology. And you learn that that was actually governing a lot of that, we're going to do air quotes here, quote unquote, weakness within your physiology. And so then you even look at when life events happen or bad relationships happen or you've been taken advantage of or something that you would not necessarily choose happens. Instead of raging against it, you can pause and say, it showed me holes that I had no idea existed. It showed
Right.
me messes I didn't even know they were there. And again, is it your fault that they're there? If we go into the depths of it, no. Like fault is a word we probably shouldn't
Right.
use
Yeah.
in when you're looking at a human soul and a human life. Because a lot of things happen when we're children. A lot of things happen when we're in the school systems. A lot of things happen because of the society we're in. And then a lot of things happen in our adult life and in relationships and in business and all of these different things. And we have to get away from fault and just move as quickly as we can back into responsibility. You don't see it until you see it, but the second you see it, it's now your responsibility to move away from it. And then that willingness changes its flavor, right? It's not just that you're going to be willing, you're going to see the absolute necessity of it. And that still doesn't mean it's easy, right? It's still
Oh,
that,
never
like,
easy. The idea is simple, but it's not easy. But the thing is, if these things don't happen, how do you get to that next version of yourself? Because that next version of yourself can handle so much more than
yeah,
prior versions, right? And
exactly.
that resilience grows. And I love those words, resilience and robust and grit, because that is not the words, those aren't the words that define most people these days. Not that you can define anybody, but they aren't words that I would use for a lot of
Well,
people.
they're not being used towards us, right? If you just kind of zoom out and look at the words being used towards a human, even in our attempt to educate, to empower, there's always this undercurrent of lack and that not enoughness from your physical body to the way that you think. And, I think one of the most powerful things that when I was looking into research, because I wanted to understand the truth of everything, I didn't want to just turn away from one and away from the other and then just come up with something. Truths are in there, even if the whole thing isn't a truth. And so one thing that I found that really rocked me to my core, especially when you move into this world of emotions, relationships, traumas that are held within the body, is when I actually was looking at animal studies. And back when psychology got to do some things that we don't do anymore with animal studies, but there was specifically this mouse study, and what they were looking for was something totally different than what I ended up seeing and interpreting, right,
Mm.
from reading that research article. But basically, the gist of it was they had the mice tread water until they couldn't, and then they rescued them, and then they put them back in until they couldn't anymore, basically. And so we won't go into what they were proving or what their findings were. But one of the things that I found interesting was when they started comparing, it was like a sub article to that one. They were comparing how the mice were treading water, and then started kind of going into a small conversation of like, well, if this one would have done this, it might have treaded water longer, or this one, and like having reasons for why this one didn't tread water for as long as this mouse, right? And I was like, but that doesn't make any sense. Why? So imagine if you threw a mouse into a cup of water, it's instantaneously in a state of survival, right? And what do we know about survival? Everywhere I looked, when a body is thrown into a state where survival is turned on, does that, the entire mechanism, does it do its absolute best? Or does it handpick like, I kind of not really feeling survival today. I think I'm going to relax on a
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
of these factors. No, when you're in a state of survival, you're doing it your best. So, what is important to also interject at this time is your best depends on what you've prepared for up into that moment, who
Mm.
you've been up into that moment. So, there's got to be a level of grace that we put on ourselves during this time. And as just human beings being alive, if your body, if your heart, even if just your mind feels like you're in a state of survival, I promise you, you're doing the best you can with what you've got.
Mm.
But then the conversation is, okay, but the best I can with what I've got is not getting me where I want to go. Perfect. Now, the next best question is, how do I either increase the best, right? Or how do I access more? Or who do I have to become to have more available to me? And when I started going into that way of thinking, then the most beautiful thing came from that, which was the person that you become in order to get the results that you desire is the gift.
Mm. Oh, I
The
love that.
person that you become, the side effect is that your tissues change. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it is for you. And so again, it's how are you going to go through the time? Right? How are you going to ask questions? How are you going to live? And if you're faced with a huge diagnosis in this time and you need to do a lot, number one is to step back and have that, grace with your own self and be like, I've been doing the best I can with what I have. Why? Because you can't survive wrong. To look in on that mouse study and be like, that mouse survived wrong.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
Or to look in on a human life right now that's saturated, pickled with adrenaline and stress, if they even turn on, the television once or talk to anybody down the street or watch anything that's going on top of everything that's going on in our families. On top of everything that goes on, as an individual navigating being an individual and needing to survive and needing to provide and needing to pay bills and needing to, and then the deeper soul heart work of, am I living my purpose? Am I, you know, giving worth and value back to the life that I've been given? And so then we look at a life and then we're like, oh, but you're surviving wrong. Impossible,
Mm.
right? Impossible. So one is to give grace to that situation, to see it for what it is, and then to take massive appropriate action, right? And that was a big qualifier back when I was looking at everything. There's such a difference in an action just for an action's sake and an appropriate action, right?
How do
So
you decide what's appropriate?
exactly. So one of the best examples is what I cover in my nutrition class. Um, the difference between I'm just going to restrict my diet to have the least amount of negative effects as possible, right? Will that change physiology to some degree? Absolutely, right? Because you accidentally follow some rules. But and that's also the beauty of living, right? But there's a massive difference in I'm just going to be strict across the board versus I'm going to identify my state and then I'm going to choose food accordingly. Very different outcome because the state is actually what is governing your digestion more than the food that you're going to try to digest, right? So you're in a different game entirely. So an action, is it a good action? Sure. Is it the action that needs to be taken to get the greatest outcome? No, right? The action, the most appropriate action is if you're not digesting food, you need to go and identify your state. And then you need to make your decisions based off of where your physiology is at, not where the clock is at. So just because the clock says it's time to eat or your work schedule says it's time to eat, if you're stressed out, if you're sad, if you just lost somebody, if you just watched the news, you shouldn't be eating, right? And those are those laws that govern nutrition and digestion, right? Digestion, absorption, all of that. It's less about the food, even though it's important to put right here, the food does matter. You can't make it not matter, right? Unless you get to a point where you are utilizing the powers of the mind to such a degree that you override any effect in the actual substance, right? But the best way to test it, is take a shot of tequila. Does that have an effect? Yes, right? You would have to get to such a point where you mastered your mind into saying, my belief to the core of me thinks that that is, water and will have no effect, right? But we're not there. And the more we learn, the further we are away from that in reality, from what I've experienced. And so the appropriate action is what really governs how you should start making decisions in your life. And it's such when you start seeing it that way, you start giving yourself, you just do a heavy sigh in your spirit and soul of like, I was working my butt off. And the reason I wasn't getting the results was because I was working at something that didn't have the power to impact physiology in that way, right? Um, and so again, when you rework it all and you work where work is needed at the same time as eating the best you can, eating the best quality that's available, because why not, right? Why not?
Right. Why
I
not?
call it removing variables. If you can remove a variable, remove it. Is that the variable? Changing your diet, is that going to change your whole life? Probably not unless you're a person that's removed every other variable that could affect human physiology. Then yes, right? But the way I like to do it, because I like the practical, which is all those, quote unquote, following the rules. And I like the poetic, and I like to do them both at the same time. Why? Because you remove as many variables as you can in the shortest amount of time. Right? And which ones are the hardest ones to go about? Those poetic ones, the interpretation of a life, not just the experience of it. And so, what you can handle on the practical side, let's do it the best we can. Why? Why not? Right? Why not gather anything and everything that could support you in achieving the outcome that you desire while acknowledging that is it just the practical? Absolutely not, right? Because we
Right.
just said you're going to digest a meal differently if you're happy versus if you're sad.
Yeah.
So that's the poetic, right? So the poetic is just as real as the practical, and both of them communicate to your physiology. But we often see like everybody really go hard into the practical. We change our diet, we try the supplements, we try the peptides, we do all of these things, and we try and we try and we try, and then we get frustrated and we're just like, okay, I'm going to eat whatever I want because clearly being happy matters more than, having a rigid diet. And then we jump over to this camp of I'm going to go dig into my traumas. I'm going to go, but you're working on the poetic. So to have more energy to go into the poetic, you need to have the practical on point,
Right.
not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
forget that that exists. I'm not going to eat organic anymore. I'm not going to anything I've ever learned. I'm just done because it doesn't matter. No, it does. And that was one of the things and another reason behind, where I'm at right now is I had to get back this message because although beautiful and the language can be beautiful to share, if we don't have an understanding of the actual medical, practical, scientific physiological background of why I say what I say, it can be I'm going to grab your attention and say, you can eat candy and you can do whatever you want. And that has nothing to do with healing. You still heal. Okay, so that's not technically wrong, but that's not how you're going to ever change somebody that has an actual physical condition that needs to be changed. That's
Right.
a very dangerous thing to say, right? But you can't say, is it wrong? No, right?
Mhm.
But again, to tell somebody that had, say, cancer, that is a
Right.
very dangerous message to put out there, even if it's paired with your life is your medicine, your body only heals, and your body only knows healing. Eat whatever you want, not for a person with a diagnosis.
Right.
It's
Right.
not, they have totally different uh, physiological and biochemical processes at play. And if you don't understand that, even though that's a true statement, you cannot apply it in that way, right? And so we have to, again, put it back in perspective. And then we also have to, gather ourselves and see the work that we've done. Because I was one of those people too. The reason I can talk about it all is because I did it all. I was
Okay.
that
Yeah.
super rigid, like every part of my life is controlled for. And then I didn't know that how much the poetic was, and I am saturating myself in fear of everything. I was afraid of pesticides. I was afraid of 5G. I was afraid of, so many things because of I was educated, right?
Yeah.
But then the intellect started working against my physiology, even though you had the best meaning, right? So you've
I
got to
think that's
have
very common these days, though, right? We're really
very common.
focusing on all these scary things. But
Exactly.
that's the thing. That's why the other part's so important because it's all there, but worrying and assessing about it is going to make that so much worse. And there's all sorts of ways that you can enjoy life with
Yeah.
awareness and
Yes.
without the fear because there's wisdom in how you go about it.
Exactly. Well, and this came up specifically when all of the fear came out with 5G. I went into learning all about it and learning how it interfaces with the human body and even learning about who was hiding it and the FCC and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know about you, but if you ever went to one of those like conferences or anything, you were the most depressed you'd ever been after you left it. You're like, how is this good for anybody?
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
after I left one of those conferences, I actually went and looked into a lot of the documents that they brought up and a lot of the stuff with the FCC and a lot of the research. And I found, I can't remember which research article it was, or maybe one of the actual official documents on releasing how harmful it was for humans. But in one of those, I'll have to find it so I can say it exactly correct. But basically, the gist was that they found that some of these frequencies had benefit to the human body. But
Wow.
if they admitted that, they would have to admit all the other things that they
Wow.
found. And then my brain just went, hold on. So what if can we get away from it? No. And I went to the extreme. If you're listening to this, don't do it. I don't recommend it. But I was so tired of being afraid of it that I literally went and I sat under a 5G tower at one point because I was so afraid. I was so afraid. And I
Wow.
went and I sat under that tower and I was like, I'm going to sit here until peace comes back into my body
Wow.
because you don't get to own me.
Right.
And I know how much more it started affecting me after I learned about it.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
so then I made a promise to myself, I'm not going to teach anyone anything unless I truly understand it. And to truly understand it, we can't just talk about one side of it. We would actually have to bring in the other side of it too. Right. And so, this was a pivotal time for me because it was like when you're afraid of something you can't control, when you're afraid of something you can't see, when you're afraid of something that's in the airways, and there's no amount of blankets and pendants, and that's not a way to live.
No.
And so we have to come back into ourselves as truly brilliant human beings and say, we've got to put intellectual information in its place, right? And if it is not serving you and you're in a state that's requiring a lot of healing, you've got to leave it alone. That's a messy attic that you need to start in your living room. Don't
Yes.
go there yet. And by the time you go there, I promise you, you will be a totally different human being because
Right.
the human being that's being asked that you become is right there in those steps closest to you. To go to the analogy again, to clean up the living room. Why? That's the room you're in right now. You have no business up in the attic.
No.
And the person you become after you clean that living room, right? will totally come into the attic in a completely different way. You will see things differently. You will be more robust. You will feel stronger within your capacity of, I can be well in any space, in any room. I can take on any challenge.
And I
And then,
think that, sorry, can I just say something here?
absolutely.
I just want to say that because, so I work at a shop a couple days a week, and
Uh-huh.
a lot of people come in and they're listening to the news, but they're listening not to the mainstream news. They're learning the truth and they got to know. And I'm like, how much do you need to know? You know enough. You know that there's a lot of really dark things happening. You know, there's the EMFs. You know, we've got fluoride coming into our water any day now in this city again, where 96% of the world doesn't have it at all. It's insane.
Yeah.
But they're worried about it, and then they come for the supplements and they come for all this
Mhm.
stuff. Like, turn that off. Create your life. See where you want to go because you're taking all this stuff to help you cope because you have to, but you're getting stressed out daily, like
Mhm.
for hours a day by putting this information that you can't handle because
Yeah.
you are coming from it that like there's one woman I know every time she comes in as soon as she starts crying. Like,
Yeah.
turn it off. You don't need to know anymore. You know enough. So that's the
Yeah.
thing. We think we need to know these things, but yet if our physiology can't handle it, then
Yeah.
focus on that. So I really think that's where a lot of people are at these days.
Yeah. Well, and my thing too is once you feel like you know something, it's very hard to unknow it, right? And I use that language very much on purpose because a lot of I mean, you can look on all sides of everything, but the quickest way, to poison or contaminate people is through their minds more than through their water, right?
100%.
That's not saying that the water doesn't matter,
Right.
but we need, or from my perspective, if we had people that again had created a safety because of how they live and how they operate and allowed the sensitivity to be the cue to them that something is off, right? You know when something's in your water, and the cleaner your vessel, the more within integrity your vessel is, the quicker you are, right? It's that sacred sensitivity. You're not wrong for being sensitive. We just don't have the capacity to buffer and to contain the level of sensitivity that these physical bodies offer us, right? That's why even your brain gates so many different things to slow down the input. But then we go to different psychedelic things because we want those doors opening, right? So you've got to create a physiology that's capable of
Yes.
holding and maintaining the level of sensitivity that your body also has to be able to cue you off to dangers. You already are equipped with everything that you need to know. Anytime you're, again, listening to the outside to tell you when you should be scared or when you should feel safe, it's never going to tell you to feel safe,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, again, my other thing too is it's not that we turn away from information, but it's got to be one of those things that when the information is given to you, what are you going to do about it? If, and we have to, it's one of those things where it's like, don't ask the question if you're not willing to have an answer, right? And make sure the questions you're asking, you want the answer to.
Right.
And again, it's one of those things where you have to triage everything thrown at you, especially in the world that we're in right now. And I personally don't think that, again, this kind of mirrors what we saw back in 2020, just we've got a different monster, right?
Mhm.
And again, when you go look into research, even just animal research, what do they say over and over again? What gets cases thrown out, right? Is if the animals being studied are in a sustained state of stress, right? Why?
Mhm.
Because your medical cream wouldn't work anyways, is their argument. Why? Because we already know that the physiology of a sustained stress response is not conducive to wound healing. Let's say that again. So if the animal is experiencing or perceiving, right, because they're in cages, so even if they thought the snake in
Right.
the other cage was going to get them, that's enough
Mhm.
for a research study. So if we follow those guidelines, that we'll throw out, a wound healing cream because the animal being studied wasn't going to heal anyways because the stress of that animal was so high because it perceived it was close to a predator. What would be better for your health at this point? To perceive a room full of snakes or to identify the snakes and get away from them and then create a physiology that was so robust that, again, put me in any city, put me in any room, and either it's not that I'll just go and, sit next to radiation by choice to prove a point. It's that I will have the intelligence, the adaptability, the capacity to move when I need to move, to act when I need to act, and to not act when I don't need to not act, right? That's just as wise. Think about, they talk about big cats. I love big cats. I love little cats too. But the female lioness, right? One of the most beautiful things about her is how often she's at complete rest. There's extreme intelligence and wisdom and self-trust and self-reliance
Mhm.
and an understanding of your like extreme capacity and capability to be able to be at rest when nothing is calling for you to attack, right? Why can she be at rest when, in her environment, her cubs could get taken, she could, so many things are not controlled for in that environment because she trusts her capacity, right? And often her king. But mostly hers. The second she needs to protect her cubs, she can. But part of why she's so resilient and so profoundly strong is because she's not fighting everything all the time and fighting imaginary ghosts and never getting any rest and never digesting her food because she's always in a state of stress.
Yes.
So we've got to say, okay, with where we're at, with what you've been given, with the awareness that you have, with the truths that you have access to. What are you going to do about it? And what's your next most appropriate move, right? So if you're in a situation where your environment is not conducive to wellness, the next step doesn't need to be how do I supplement myself into being able to sustain being mediocre here. It's okay, the supplements are not what's needed right now because I'm going to just, weigh it out. And would it be the most appropriate action to start, doing all these detoxes and all of these things, or taking a bigger action that makes those little actions unnecessary? And again, why don't we take the bigger actions? Because they're harder. There's more loss involved. There's more change involved. There's more what perceived, unpredictability, and we don't like that. And so again, you have to really go into these conversations as truthfully as you can with that brutal, beautiful honesty with yourself of like, okay, can you be okay knowing that this is in your water here? If yes, okay. And what can we do to make it as good as we can to where you stop thinking about it? But if you can't stop thinking about it, it's in circulation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people struggling with that right now because they're so mad and they have to protect themselves. And it's coming from protection, which I understand. You don't want to be drinking the fluoride in the water, but
Mhm.
a lot of times people do things out of an energy of protection rather
Yeah.
than to not get something or to not rather than towards what's possible towards health. And that's
So
like,
let's do a little, I think this is such a beautiful conversation. So this is so important for right now. So if I had two different people and say we had the same exact environment, and we just had to make the person A survive. Person B was doing their own thing. They were learning everything. How would we, if we could be, the God for the day and create all the medicine around person A, how would we do it? How would I do it? I would remove as much fear from that person as physically possible. I would have them follow all of the rules that communicate to their physiology, from breathing to moving, to digestion to light to sleep to energy to connection to purpose to passion. That person would automatically be more physiologically robust than the person learning about everything, trying to micromanage away from everything through other external things. And so you have to just create a study yourself.
mm,
If all things are considered and you can't change these factors, how would you make person A healthier? Go. And every single time I did that, no matter where the person was at on the planet or what was going on in the environment, of course, certain environments are an absolute, you move away, right? Um, but if it's not that blatant, then again, you go to the truths of the truths of the truth. What person would survive in this situation better than any other person? A person that was well rested, that knew how to make food decisions based off of their mood and their state and their digestive capacity instead of just following a diet. The person that needed less supplementation, less manipulation to put their physiology into a state of feeling good, right? A person that was sleeping deeply, a person that was connected and stimulated, and a person that, was passionate, a person that there's so many factors, and you would be so busy doing that oftentimes you don't have time, or if the information comes into your awareness, you do something with it or you throw it out. And when we can get to that capacity, that adaptability, but you have to be able to trust yourself enough to know, oh, I threw that out, right? You
the
have to
big
have a
word,
self-reliance.
that trust
Yeah.
of
But
self,
you
right?
won't have, think about what denatures trust within a person. Outsourcing your safety, outsourcing your health, outsourcing your wellness, outsourcing what is right, outsourcing your beliefs. And the body and the brain require evidence. So oftentimes we're asking the body and the brain to do something without evidence. And the evidence that you've given it is, we don't trust us. We change our diet based off of the next podcast.
Right.
We don't trust us. We look
Yeah.
to everybody else to see if they're freaking out, to see if I should freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is how we're taught. This is what's in your airways. So to get out of it, you've got to start living your way out of it. You can't think your way out of this. We talk about all the time, like, that our minds have been, in this warfare, and our minds have been captured and we've been programmed, but then we still utilize the mind as our compass. Where you can't, you've got to create a different amount of evidence in your body of, no, something wasn't sitting right in my gut. How did I know? Because I wasn't digesting my meal. And I'm not going to think my way through it. I'm going to analyze the situation from a different perspective, not of what it looks like, what it sounds like. Because, that was my learning too in the past 4 years, was you can say everything perfectly. You can be the best performance. And the truth will eventually come out of what is true, like the actual truth of what it is. And it's that Wayne Dyer quote, when you squeeze an orange, orange juice comes out. Right? And just because sometimes the squeeze doesn't happen, in the beginning, doesn't mean that it's not going to happen eventually. And eventually, when things get squeezed, they show you the truth of what they are. And that's the same for you too. And so it's really this process of, how do I live into a version of myself that I trust? And a version of yourself that you trust is one that says, if I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. And we got to start there. If I say that I'm going to, live in a way that promotes the healing of my tissues, I'm going to do it. Or even on the alternative that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge in the natural world is if I want to choose an allopathic treatment, I'm going to go all in on it. Why? Because I chose it. But
Right.
we've lost that capacity altogether. And now we're almost afraid of everything. We can find something wrong with everything. And the other thing that I found in this past 4 years was that we often look at people who are confident in their message, and their confidence guides our how much we consume what they're saying, right? And that's also a very dangerous thing, especially in a performative world. And so I also saw, behind the scenes working when people have to tell you the truth so that they get big changes in their life, was just this deep insecurity, even in kindness, goodness, positive messages, because we're being manipulated with those too. And so now more than ever, it's being asked of us on an individual level of don't just listen to the words, right? Listen a level deeper. Listen a level deeper. And then observe, and not just what it looks like. Again, we're in a world that performs, right? But you've got to be in you to start feeling the truth of situations. And then the kicker, and my biggest lesson, is the second you feel it, don't you dare talk yourself out of it. The second you feel the truth of it,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what everybody else is saying. It doesn't matter what it could be, what it seemed like. It's not. And the second that you can acknowledge that and get in that discomfort of, oh my gosh, I have been deceived, I've been manipulated, I've been used, and I've been stolen
Wow.
from. The second you feel that, you change. And again, that's your responsibility. Was it your fault? No.
Right.
But it is now
Right.
your responsibility to
And,
do something with it.
and
So again, this is the relationship we're having with life right now, with society, with media, even with social media, even with, we want to say well-meaning, but unfortunately I got a side of well-meaning that was very dark. Um, so it's my thing is no matter who's speaking, no matter how confident they seem, pay attention to how much confidence makes you want to do whatever they say, right? We're in a different world of manipulation. It's not just scare you and then sell the thing. It's let me show you how good I am. Let me talk with such confidence. And even if I don't know anything about it, even if I've never done anything that I'm saying, if I say it with confidence, or if I can call out, or if I can seem something, it's more likely that you'll believe what I'm about to hand you. So we've got to get to a point where we are in our bodies so much that the second we feel it, we investigate on that level, knowing that everybody is learning. Like, I don't know about you, but you see all the time, like psychology courses in marketing and sales.
Mhm.
We know so much about human psychology. We know so much about how to manipulate and the tendencies and all of these different things. Regular people know this, right? It's being used against us everywhere. But
Always.
the thing that you can't ever lose is the fact that your body knows the truth. What we've lost is the clear signal in our capacity to hear it. Of
Yes.
like, something's not sitting right. I want to like that person. I want to think that they mean well. The performance looks great. But something in me is off. And that needs to be enough. That's enough. But instead, we do it the opposite.
Yeah.
It's not enough till it's just crashing in on us and you can't deny it and the whole world can't deny it. And then you're like, okay, okay, fine. And so that's where we've got to get. And I think my thing during this time, because we could get so mad at everything. And like, trust me, I went through a little phase of this too, like everything. Is it all just a lie? Is it all just a show? Is it all just who can perform it best? And, I don't know. But then you get to a point of like, okay, or this is what I asked myself is like, Cassie, well, what else is being required at this time? it's making you be so much more sensitive to deception, to the lies. And again, like we kind of hinted at in the beginning of this conversation, the version of me now that's aware of this level of manipulation, this level of psychological tactics and all of these different things, I don't, you wouldn't want to mess with her.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So everybody listening to this, anyone that ever listens to this, yes, it's worked on all of us, all of us, all of us, right? But where we start changing it is where we start being a different, um, we use it differently. We become stronger, wiser, right? Think about even like when you're working with athletes, they don't go into all the little tiny things and all the little things that improve a little thing here and there unless you're good enough to start caring about those things. So now I think if you're in this place where you're having to be in this battlefield of the mind, where you see the deception of the world, you feel powerless. You're now in a different game. And now more than ever, we need to take care of our physical vessels even better than before. Why? We are on a totally different battlefield. So to me, if you're going into battle, right? One of the hardest wars you're ever going to go against, which is what's happening in our minds and in our souls and in our spirits. And you think you're going to do that with a weak body? It's not fair. It's not fair. Just think about a night where you've had, like in medical school, 3 hours of sleep. Like you're basically legally drunk while you're driving. You're not functioning. So then you're going to say a person that's on that level physically is going to go and be able to see through the deception, make decisions the instant they need to make decisions, have the faith in themselves that they have everything they need the second they need it, and they can take action and take complete appropriate action the second it's needed. No, it's all designed perfectly. But again, when you have the awareness, you see that you're in the mess. It's not your fault, but now it's your responsibility. And how do we start cleaning up the mess? The food does matter. The light does matter.
Right.
But how do you do it to where you remove the fear of it? Do you see how you're in a different game altogether? So you follow the rules, you do light, you do nutrition, you do all of those things because you already know it. Unless you're really good at unknowing things, right? Then you live yourself to a different reality in this world of the poetic, right? I, in the beginning, wasn't a person that didn't overthink and overanalyze pesticides, GMO, all of those different things. I knew too much, but I have worked myself into a life where I really don't care. Does that mean I go to a grocery store and I don't make decisions based off of what I know, as best we can know right now?
Right.
No, I do the best I can with what I have, period, forever, right? Just like if you were anything in life, do the best you can with what you have. And then when you know better, do better. And then you just keep it super simple. And it's always right within your control.
But that
And then,
choice also has a very different energy because you're not choosing the other one because you fear it. You're choosing the
exactly.
better one because you appreciate it. Like for me, it's the appreciation of the person who took the time and the care to do it that way. Right.
Yeah,
And that's what my body craves because I appreciate that so much. Why would I just choose the other one? And I won't even appreciate the other thing.
exactly. Well, and that's where you start getting more into the poetry of things because, you know, um, the truth is we don't know all of the things we think we know. And if you could alter your knowing in a direction that benefits you, you're actually better off than the people just getting the cause and effect of what it is. And what I mean by that is, I talked about this in my nutrition class because it's so important when it comes to food. What I realized was unless you're sitting there with an actual chemistry set, you don't know the truth about that food.
Mm.
And this was like, again, a conversation that I had a lot of times was like, okay, well, then what gets that? We believe in that green stamp, right? But what if there's corruption behind that too? And I got into that world and then I was just like, you know what? I would rather, you've got to pick your rather.
Yes.
And
Right.
then you have to have that trust in yourself, right? Because I do think that our intuition would lead us away from, just even if you're just looking at a body being selfish for its own survival, that it would give you cues on things you wouldn't even know you could pick up on and say, I don't want those blueberries because I'm just not digging the blue. I don't know. And it would have nothing to do. They had a green stamp on it, but for whatever reason, you're just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It's just, I'm not jiving with it today. And what if that saved you from something? I think about that all the time, even if I had like my organic matcha with all of my ingredients and all of these different things, and then I go and I spill it. And instead of being like, well, that sucks, or this must be an unlucky day, my brain now immediately goes, because of all the work I've done on it, to I wonder if there was something in that I wasn't supposed to have today. And life starts being so much more
Right.
beautiful when you give the possibility for that, because we give the possibility for all of the negative, all of the negative. And there was a story one time about a farmer. He had a small little truly organic farm, truly regenerative, but he couldn't pay the fees to get the green stamps, to get the certifications. So his produce was just being put out as not organic, starting with the four, the stuff everyone looks over. And the truth of it was that it was this tiny family farm that they prayed over their land. They took care of everything on that land. They picked them by hand. And then I was like, oh my gosh, what if you, because it wasn't organic and that was the only blueberry box available at the store, and you got it and you polluted it with your thoughts that it was poison when it was actually the most, because when we look into the structure of water and we look into intention and we look into,
Mhm.
all that is, capable in that world, it was given to you in its greatest and you were the poison. So every time I go into life now, I'm like, I will not be the poison for me anymore. I was poison for myself for far too long
Ooh, I like
out of the guise of intellect. And I refuse to be part of that anymore. So if any point I get to be medicine for myself, I'm going to be the first in line to do it. And not in this just blissfully ignorant way of, no, the truth is you actually have no idea. You have no idea. And so if you have an investment into the outcome, which we know we do, right? Quantum physics, all of that is showing us so much more. um, then why not put it in a direction that benefits you? Refuse to be the poison in your own life.
Ugh,
Commit to being the medicine of every moment of your life, regardless of what's happening, because you are what alchemizes every single moment, right? Placebo effect is not just in research, but
right.
we call it placebo effect and we minimize it down to effect when we don't actually realize that it's happening in every breath of our life. And so if you're not using it to your advantage, it's almost guaranteed, because of the world we're in, that it's working against you. And
Yes.
we call it knowledge, we call it insight, we call it news, we call it information, we call it awareness.
Yes.
But to your body, unfortunately, it's fear, anxiety, worry, which in your chemistry is corrosive, is
Right.
poisonous.
Right.
So the
That's
truth of the truth of the truth of what we're doing, what is it? Does food matter? I will always forever say yes to the degree that it does. But there is so much more to that equation, which is you. 80% of what happens in that conversation between you and food happens it's in you. And then
right.
if we look at even what science says that the human is capable of, most of us aren't accessing. So we can't bank on the fact that we can just like eat 1,000 Twinkies and have no effect unless you've really done a lot of work on yourself,
Right.
right?
Right.
So again, my way of like seeing just simple, practical, rational thinking is, if food matters, even a little, right? Think if you were doing this for your child or your mother or somebody that you adore, if it mattered even a little, you would want them to have the best,
Yeah.
right? It's not that you would choose something less. because it didn't matter as much as something else. No, you would always want to give the best. That's part of the beauty of love, right? Um, and so I think once we start seeing things clearly, truly, it helps you start making different decisions. And then again, you start seeing the value of the journey. We talk about this all the time, but when you put it on healing a condition, we don't think this way with the condition. I didn't think this way, right? My skin was just talking so much. My vision was going. My hair was thin. My muscles were atrophying. I had so much going on, very real. So in that moment, if I would have gone back to me and been like, hey, don't just try to get to the end point, which is all of this going away, I would have been like, shut up, shut up. But now looking back, right, I wouldn't be even, you know, somebody that had value even in this conversation for you today, had I not gone through what I went through. And it's not how did I get to the results the quickest, the easiest, with the least amount of effort and the least amount of struggle. No, I struggled. I worked. It it's in my voice because it was in my body, right? Because it was in my experience. It's still in my heart because I went through it. You
Right,
don't go through something and it leaves you, right?
right.
And so that, and to look back and be like, if my mom could have saved me from all of it, she would have in a heartbeat. And there's this other beautiful part of life too, even as parents, like you just be there, right? It's not your job to take away every hard thing that will ever happen, because I
Absolutely.
promise you, that soul, that body, that individual, right? There is something about people being around you, because when power is spoken over you, I was in a season in a relationship, in this past 4 years where power was not spoken over me. Negativity was spoken over me. Cruelty was spoken over me. All of these different things. And you have to know how much that impacts the journey. Because when you're on a hard journey, call it a soul journey, call it a spiritual journey, and part of your environment that has the closest inputs into your blood, which are your relationships, if it is corrosive in nature, it's not helping you become quicker. It's working against you, right? And that's where you have to really start being discerning, and you have to get out of that. I can, see all of these things for other people. I can understand all of these things for other people. You have to hone in on you and hone in on your journey, and where you're at and what you're called to do and the truths that you see when you see them. And those around you will contribute. And it's not always that the contribution is, easy. We can talk to our, parents and siblings and relationships and lovers and all that all the time. The beautiful relationships aren't just because they're easy. It's that the resistance that's presented benefits you. It's not a resistance that you have to create benefit out of because there was no benefit to be found, right?
Mhm.
And there's a difference in that. To understand, again, the difference between struggle and effort is very important, and on all aspects of a person. And to know, again, if you're in a time of hard healing, whether that's emotional, um, on the heart level, or literally in your physical tissues, to truly write it down. If you have to write it on your mirror, if you have to write it 15 times, put it on your phone screen. Who you become because of what you go through is the gift. The side effect is that your tissues heal. The side effect is that your physiology changes. And if we told that to people, don't you think medicine, or what we associate with medicine, would drastically change? And instead of being like, we're gonna do this and we're going to make you feel better tomorrow and we're going to give you this pill and you're going to have an
Right,
instantaneous effect, and it
right.
would be like, no, because I'm not getting to become a person, even take social anxiety. A lot of people struggle with social anxiety, and then we
Oh,
medicate with either alcohol, or even some people go to pharmaceuticals if it gets to a certain degree. And instead of equipping people with what is required to do an appropriate change, and you eliminate all the variables where food could come in, where light could come in because of your hormones and all these different things. And then you get down to the core of it, of that self-image, that self-belief, different things that have shaped how you view yourself, how you view others, all of those beautiful conversations. You never get to have them. You
right.
never get to have
Right.
them.
Yes.
So
And
again,
we're
it's
going
so
towards that
hard
even
because
more and more these days because we're trying to relieve people of their suffering to the
yeah,
point where here in Canada, they want to offer you medical assistance in dying for depression,
yeah.
right? Like, who are you on the other side of that? All the kids win, everybody, we can't offend, and nobody has to go through a hard time. But that brings out the beauty of who we are, and we get to learn what we're capable of.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, the conversation, what I had to learn myself is you choose your hard, right? Um, and it's very important to, again, choose. You never really get a life, I don't think, or I haven't met anyone yet. I would love to if you have that story, that doesn't encounter difficulty, that doesn't encounter tragedy, that doesn't encounter hardship. Um, Life comes with the hard, life comes with the difficulty. And David White has a poem, I always got to bring him in, that I just fell in love with. I went to him in 2020. His words just spoke to something so deep in me. And then again, I've revisited him in these past 4 years of a deep, like a totally different pain. But he has this poem. I'll have to find it. I don't remember exactly what it's called. But it basically says that if we were just told that life is supposed to break your heart, right? It's supposed to break your heart. And I was like, I wonder if as a young girl, because I feel like I've learned so much through relationship, and I think a lot of people do, especially women are very relational beings. We value that from our physiology to our hearts, right? Um, and if I would have known back then that life is gonna break your heart, right? And there's nothing you can do to, you know, strategize your way out of it. And there's so much that happens that has nothing to do with you, right? And to those lessons, they don't come from not feeling, right? And we look at this and we value it within exercise and working out, right? If you go to the gym and we anesthetize your muscles, what effects would you get? You'd just be blissfully laying there, right? Or if we made it not hurt, like how would you have, as the athletes talk about all the time, like how it starts creating your character because you're able to push your body in these difficult times. If
Mhm.
we made it not hurt, if we made you not lose your breath, if we what value, right? And again, we have to really look into the difference between the value of things and not just what they appear to be. And you said everything is kind of being marketed as removing your suffering as quickly as you can, but to realize, that was one of the things that really woke me up was in the beginning, I was one of the best at manipulating away symptoms through supplements and compounds. I was the best. And I was so excited about how quickly we could do it and how quickly I could get people results. And they loved it and they were happy and they kept trying to come back. And then I realized that the things I was really needing them to change, they no longer had the necessity or the urgency to change those things, even though I knew physiologically that was still ongoing in their physiology and would eventually reach a
Right.
peak, right? And so, but no matter how much I tried to convey that message, they're like, oh, no, I'm fine. My anxiety, you got rid of my anxiety. I just take this anytime I do this.
Right.
I'm not even but their bodies were still reacting. I was manipulating away the effects,
Right.
right? But you can only play that game for so long. And that was this huge come to Jesus moment for me of like, oh no,
Mm,
I'm not helping them.
right.
I'm in the truest sense, I'm not helping them, because it would be better for me to say, hey, instead of knocking you out with valerian and 5-HTP and magnesium and all of these different things, the truth that needs to be told to you right now is you need to go have the conversation with the person you're cheating on that you can't sleep beside at night.
Thank you.
That's the conversation that needs to be
Totally.
had. But we're not willing to do that, because why? When you go into those truths, when you open some of those doors, it opens something we don't want opened, right? It has a place where we have either judgment, like, because even for the sake of this story, did you have judgment, your own personal judgment on that story, either side of it? Did you have an emotional ping because of something you experienced? So these things are happening in your body, even if you smiled through that story, right? And this is the truth about human physiology. This is the truth about, I say all the time, a smile can either hide the medicine or it holds the medicine. And the only person that knows the difference is the one smiling.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's smiling because their whole body is experiencing joy and elation and gratitude and just that goosebump feeling, versus somebody that's smiling because they're so uncomfortable and they don't know how to leave and they don't know how to run away and they don't know how to tell the truth. Both of them are smiles. Two totally different biochemical expressions, physiological reactions, that the only way you would know is to actually put them, hooked up to these ways of measuring these things.
Right.
And it's so important because this is what's happening. This is what's happening in our world. The more we can, and that's why the more you can manipulate it away, we live in a world of manipulation-based medicine. And again, it's not to say that it's bad. It's just we need to start calling it what it is. You've got to change the life that created the effect, right? Is it your fault? No. Is it your responsibility? Yes. Right? If somebody came into my house today and destroyed it and stole things and created this huge mess, was it my fault? No. But if I don't clean it up, if I don't take responsibility for the mess, guess who's going to have to live with it forever? Me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to step over it every single day. I wasn't the one that put it there. I know, but it's in your house. And so this again is how we have to remove fault, remove, I wish I would have known. If I would have known that, I would have done this. Stop. You're exactly where you need to be. And everything that you have can be utilized, or it's time to drop it and lighten your load. And it's such a beautiful part of healing, because again, healing is always happening. That's true. That's
Yeah.
so true.
Can you
You're
talk to that?
never.
Because people will see there, I think that we really need to call for a reframe
Mhm.
of our symptoms of what our
Yeah,
body's doing in response to our life or in response to a substance or in response to whatever. So can you speak to that? Because this idea of healing, I think, is pretty radical for a lot of people. So I was just talking to somebody's going to come talk to me this week about something going on, and I'm like, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do this? Like the first thing you need to do is trust that your body is not going wrong.
yeah,
Number one, before anything else, you're not going to, don't depend on all the things that you think you should be doing.
yeah,
Reframe what's going on in the first place. So can you
yeah.
talk to that about the symptoms and what the ball, what, because healing isn't what people always think.
No. So that was one of the biggest revelations that I had when I was just trying to distill down all of these right answers and find truths. Truths were, when I was looking, were there were no exceptions, right? It wasn't, yes, it works except for this, this, and this, or this works unless this, 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 this. It was like, no, the truth is a truth is a truth. It works even if you don't know about it, type truth. And so what I ultimately found was the body only knows healing. So, in all of the mechanisms that it has, it's not to promote death and dying, it's to promote survival and living. It doesn't change, the programming ever. It's never like, okay, well, the, operator of me really sucks and I don't really like her. So let's turn on the death and dying and disease switch. No. So when you look at it from a true perspective, you see that everything it's doing is how it's surviving the life that's being lived. So I reworded, symptoms and call it healing responses so that we can start seeing it differently and asking different, more appropriate questions. So the healing response that is a scab, we're so grateful for, right? But then the healing response that is what we call a tumor, we are terrified of. And to be able to look at them both and be like, there's a reason the body is doing what it's doing.
Mhm.
And it's to promote your survival, not to go in the opposite direction. And then when you look at it from that perspective, you ask a entirely different set of questions. And it's never that we're going to, because I think this also gets lost in this message and how the message is repurposed. It's not, I have a tumor and I'm just going to be happy about it and know that my body's always healing and my life is my medicine. And as long as I'm happy and comfortable, this should go away. No, we've lived something with such consistency at this point where there's a physiological tissue change. Okay. So if we're wanting to change the tissue, we've got to change the chemistry. And, that's where you're playing in the game of manipulation that we all know is hit or miss, or you have to take it forever, or it starts coming back, that whole game.
Right.
Or you go into the life and you change the life that created the chemistry that contributed to that outcome. And again, it's contributed because then people fall into the trap of thinking, well, I lived wrong. No, you lived, and this is the effect of it, right? If I stayed out in the sun too long, I wasn't, wrong. I just didn't listen to the cues of my body. I overrode it so I could do what I wanted. And there's a repercussion to my actions. And to start being able to look at it all like that, again, removes that additional chemistry of fear that saturates you when you get a diagnosis, when they call something going on in your body something, right? Because now it's the enemy, when it's just the
Yeah.
effect of the life that was being lived. And so in order to change it, you go into the life. And I, again, like to remove variables because you can't ever say it was just the food or not the food. You can't just say it was just this relationship or had nothing to do with relationships. Again, you have to get into that person as much as you can. And, mind, body, heart, soul, habits, interpretations. And that's why, this is a self work, because even working with a lot of people, we would get to questions that I would ask them, and we would hit a pause. And so I always knew in those moments it was a place I didn't need to go, but I knew it was a place they had to. And so again, this is this self-work of, kind of that point where you can imagine, the stories of God, if you believe in that, or even a parent where they're like, this is where I can go no further, and the rest of the journey is yours. Um, and to know that there's a component of healing within all people, that it's this radical honesty with yourself, this extreme transparency. And in order to go there, we have to have curiosity
Yes.
when we ask the questions, because if we don't have it, all parts of your psychology and nervous system have created a mechanism of protection in those places on purpose. And so, again, you have to go about these things. And from what I've experienced, no practitioner, no matter what they practice, allowed in some of these rooms, right? It's a one person entry, and the person that matches the heartbeat is the only one that gets to enter. And to have that awareness, because I found too that if I would have pushed to go in those doors or bulldoze and be like, I'm going in and we're going to ask you questions, and it would have irritated and inflamed instead of soothing. And so then again, you're not helping. You're not being of service at that point.
Right.
You're now part of the problem. And so we've got to have this, again, we've got to be our health. We've got to truly, in the truest sense, you know, like take back these words. I truly believe there will be, I say it all the time because my heart just believes that with all the work we're doing, there will be a generation of children that grow into a generation of adults that when you ask them who their doctor is, they just look at you like, what is a doctor? Like the doctor is the one that feels your body. And you're like,
Oh, we have a lot of work to do to get
right?
there,
But it's
right?
possible.
Oh,
And
it's
the way that
possible.
we
That's
get
what I
there,
think it's so possible. That's why it's so important. And I was going to say this a while ago. It came to me is when we do this work and then we do this before we have our children and we raise our children this way as normal as it is their birthright,
yeah,
then it won't take long to change everything. But there's a lot of work to be done when we're seeing where future generations are heading now and current generations.
yeah.
But the world can change so quickly if we were to raise our children from that perspective.
Well, and our children, like, they look to us. They absorb us.
Yeah.
They watch, they're learning, they're translating and interpreting based off of what they see. And that's why, again, it's very important to be um, in a devotion to the living of what we believe over the speaking of it. Because I have noticed too, in some interactions where what's being spoken is not what's being lived. And that creates a level of, because children, they're little lie detector tests in the purest sense. Um, and when there's a lack of integrity between what they're seeing and what's being spoken, right? You have to know your body's doing the same thing. It's being like, okay, well, we don't trust one of those two things, right? And we must trust what we're living over what we're saying, right? But there must be something good about what we're saying. And so again, we have to look at the integrity and the truth of how we're living. And this is work being done right here in your heart and soul while you're walking, while you're driving, while you're sitting at our tables in our homes. And it's not really something that can even be conveyed, you know, to anyone outside of us when it's being done truly, right? Because it's a way of living in integrity. Again, like if we went into every household and said, what does this person believe in? Observe them living for a day and not living just when the cameras are on. I learned that
Yeah,
lesson.
yeah.
That can't be part of that equation. You create a different character anytime the camera turns on. And but like if we were to look into the homes and be like, what's actually in circulation in this person? What do they actually believe in? And the good news is you can do that for yourself. I do that with myself all the time, especially when I get into a season or a chapter. I call them my seasons of suck, where things are just like, oh my
Seasons of suck.
gosh, here we are again. And there's lots of really sticky places and it touches lots of emotions and a lot of um, to be in those places and be like, this is trying to squeeze out something that doesn't deserve your soul, that doesn't deserve your spirit, that doesn't deserve your mind, or even at the simplest doesn't deserve your physical presence. And to be able to, for us to start looking at everything in a different way, to collect different levels of information, to be able to investigate ourselves and diagnose our lives instead of trying to diagnose our bodies that are reflecting the lives, right?
Mhm.
Because working with a lot of people too, I had to get to a point where it wasn't that I um, was psychic or anything like that. And I try to joke around about it because it really is once you start really understanding bodies. Um, it wasn't that I was psychic in my ability to, go into the places where questions need to be asked or be like, are you telling me the truth? Let's ask that one more time. But it was as plain as seeing somebody with a sunburn. Your first question would be, were you out in the sun for an extended period of time? That would be your first question, not because you're psychic, but because you understood, right? And we do well, with scabs and sunburns and exhaustion, even maybe. But when it comes to these other more physical manifestations of living, we have a totally different paradigm that we think from. And again, that's where we've got to clarify our vision, clarify There's truths even in allopathic medicine, even though the whole thing and how it's being used is not truth, right? That's where you have to be careful. Just because somebody can say a truth or a truth exists within something doesn't mean the whole thing is true.
Right.
And there's a learning curve to that. So the way that I even got to the stuff that I teach is because I went and I didn't say allopathic medicine is wrong. I said, why do certain things in allopathic medicine, quote unquote, work? And then I had to redefine what work meant. And then I had to redefine all of these different things because the language we use is very important too. So most of what I did was reorienting myself to what it actually meant and what these words actually meant and what the true, not just translation, but interpretation was. And then going back and asking these questions in a different way of, okay, so what's the truth here? And, you get to a point where it's like, okay, you can manipulate human physiology and psychology easily with substances, with lights, with okay, is that healing? Sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. So then you get into a whole, just an entirely different world when you're saying, what's a truth? What does a body absolutely need in order to digest any food, right? Those are truths, right? What do you actually have to pay attention to more than even the food they're consuming? Those are the truths. And again, it would just be too much work on a system. You can't put these things into an algorithm. Again, we say it all the time, like there's a reason they don't study women as much as they study male physiology and medicine and pharmacology and all of that stuff, because there's too much to be considered. There's too much complexity already at play. And so the truth is you're that complex today. And everything is not as algorithmic as we would want it to be, which means when you're a practitioner, if you're trying to do it truly, it's a lot of work. And everything has to be considered and every variable has to be ruled out. And you can't ever be in a truthful place of making a blanket statement. And that's part of the difficulty of it is because then people are like, well, you're being vague. Well, again, the best way to explain it is if we had 50 people in front of us right now and you had to generalize instructions on getting them all to their individual homes. You don't know where any of them live. You don't know if any of them even live in a country that's not the country you're in. You don't know anything. Give them instructions on how to get home. And that would actually be easier and more likely than giving instructions to people on how to heal their very unique, dynamic bodies. And so again, that's why I don't just come out and be like, eat this, do this, do this. Don't do this. This doesn't matter. This does. Because unless I'm sitting in front of you, asking you to be very honest with me, I won't know. Because there are situations where, a fruit wouldn't be what you needed to consume. There would be situations where a steak isn't what you need to consume. And I would have to ask the questions to know which answer was true, not just is steak good for people
Right.
or fruits healthy.
Right.
Okay, so a right answer is great, but a true answer is what people need to
Right.
change their bodies.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between the two.
But there are some underlying fundamentals I
Hmm.
tell people. Like I was just speaking at an event on the weekend, like the word curiosity. We
Yeah.
all will do better with curiosity and imagination and wonder, right?
Yeah.
So some of those more intangible things like that, like the belief in oneself, the belief in knowing that the body heals. We
Yeah.
also need hydration and minerals, and we need to
Yeah.
flow and not be stagnant. Good
Yeah.
quality food. The food could be different, but let's keep it as clean and real and as possible. Like there are some really basic
And
underlying
that's the beauty of it.
fundamentals.
That's what I love that you bring this up because that's what deflated me and inflated me simultaneously. Because I went and got certified in all the flashiest stuff because I thought that the conditions I had were so serious that you would have to have the latest and greatest to ever combat what I had. And so I went and got certified in lasers, peptides, everything, IV therapy, ozone therapy. I did everything. And
Wow.
then when I got to this point where it was like, why are we still just manipulating? And like people are not free. They're just a cleaner way of imprisoned. And that's when I started reworking
Yeah.
everything. And then that was again the bubble burst or inflation point, if you want to say, simultaneously of like, oh my gosh, if a person just does the basics, the simple basics, um, that all humans need to be alive, that, you know, the truths that you find in all cultures and all of the, like, if
Yes.
you input those things consistently, the
Yes.
person, it removes the necessity for all the flashy things.
Yes.
And so that's when my license became pretty like my like even prescribing all of that, like all of those things became pretty irrelevant. I never prescribed not one pharmaceutical drug, not even a compounded hormone, not anything. Because when you do the basics, when you follow the simple rules of this planet and the body that you're on, just as if you have to breathe every single day, there's other things, you know, we simplify down to the rules, right? That
Yes.
the body has to have, just like you're saying, the simple basics.
Yes.
Get super, super simple, basic with yourself, right? If you were to make, just guess, to make a body the healthiest you could, and like just evaluate yourself right now. Could you eat better than you're doing right now? If yes, try that. Could you be more intentional with your light exposure? Could you be incorporate more movement and play into your day? Could you incorporate more pleasure and connection into your day? Can you make sure you're resting and sleeping deeply? Can like there's if you just got those basic things, but
Yes.
again, they're not flashy and they're not sexy and they're not profitable really um, until you like try to make them super technical and try to get into mitochondria health and talk about circadian rhythm and overcomplicate things. But
Right.
again, just like you're saying, if we just did the basics, how far would we get? And I did that experiment and you get the whole way. But you have to be willing to go through the journey of becoming a person that doesn't think that they need a bailout, becoming a person that is resourceful, becoming a person that, you know, when you go into a little small town that doesn't have organic produce, you're not freaking out or fasting. You're paying attention to where you're at physiologically, and then you're making appropriate decisions based off of that, right? Not because you don't understand organic and not organic, or you don't understand the impact that glyphosate and pesticides and all of those things have on the body. It's not that that doesn't exist now. It's just, okay, with where you're at, how are we going to do this the best?
Right.
With whatever room you're in, how are we going to do this the best? With, and that's literally how you think your way out of it. But you've got to be a person resilient enough to keep your eye contact and keep focused and not let the outside noise come in and be like, no, you can't. You can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't. Right.
What kind of
And
tools would you have for somebody who is led so far off from themselves? I think one of the biggest things is people need to come back to knowing who they are and knowing that that's probably the most important relationship before any other one. And
yeah.
how do you teach them to trust this body and to support it? Because so many people, they are looking for everything outside of them, the expert advice, the
Mhm.
pill, whether it's a white pill from the pharmacy or a green pill from the health food store. Like, what are some tools to get people to get there? Like, people come in, and I had some really great conversations yesterday with just what are the stories you're telling yourselves?
Mhm.
Like, what's the repeat story? And some people, like even that sometimes they don't even realize it until it's pointed out to them. So what are some tools that you help for people that are looking, but they're looking in all the wrong places?
Yeah, so let's start with the truth that will really open up your eyes. When I looked into why people don't trust their body, what I ended up finding was that we do. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So let's see it. Let's zoom out and look at a different perspective. So you trust your body enough to take a pill, to go into a surgery, to there is a level of trust. So we've misplaced it again because again we've put that no, well, we trust the practitioner that's going to cut into our body. No, you also have to trust that your body knows how to, at the least, repair the incision so that you don't just bleed out.
Right.
And a step further, you have to believe that if they remove an organ, you can survive that. And you have to believe that if you take a pill, it's going to have an action. And you have to believe that if you exercise, it has effects. So it's just the totality. And again, what you're pointing towards is the story we're telling ourselves. So every single day, the fact, and like again, just super simplify everything. How many days of your life has your body successfully killed you? And how many days of your life has your body successfully saved you from innumerable things, things you'll never even know could possibly have risked your life? And so, simple statistics there. If you're listening to this, odds are you're on the positive side of that thing. So, 100% of your life, your body has saved your life. Some instances that you've known about, some that you have not, some that might have required other inputs, but no matter what, your body was the one that had to recover from anything and everything, no matter what it was. So again, put it down on paper because that's the truth. And then go to the, it can be overwhelming or scary or intimidating or blissfully awe-inspiring that think about your body. If your body was out to get you, all it would have to do is change one little tiny clotting factor.
Ah,
It would be done. But you don't even know about clotting factors, right?
right.
Even the people that know about clotting factors don't even know everything about them. And if we were to go head to head, me against your body, no matter who you are right now, no matter how quote unquote ill or unwell you are right now, you and me, we're going to go head to head. We'll see if you trust your body or you trust me more. I know a lot. I made really good grades and I have really great success stories and before and afters and all of that stuff. Okay, but we're going to go head to head real quick. We're going to cut you. And the bet is either going to be if you go with me, I have to write out on a piece of paper every single process that is required to stop you from bleeding. I cannot miss a step. I cannot miss a molecule. I cannot miss anything to have your body stop bleeding off of my command and my instruction. Or, so if you want to go with me, and I promise you, I have every proof to show you that I know a lot of things. Or should we go with your body?
Mm,
Who
right.
would you go with right now? Let's put you on the hot seat. Would you choose me
I
and my
think I choose my
expertise?
body.
No, you would choose your body. You'd be like,
Yeah.
you seem great. Um, so what do you really trust? You trust yourself. There's just a limit to how far you're going to let that go, right? And fear comes in and society comes in. And again, translation, the medical industry translates your body in a language that's antagonistic and against you, not, oh, yeah, literally all of it is for you. There's nothing else programmed into your DNA. But our translation of it will make you either afraid of it or grateful for it. Scab, grateful. Tumor, resentful.
Mm,
Because of what? A translation by an industry that profits off of
yeah.
exactly what it sells you, right? And again, we could get angry about it or we could just change it and remove ourselves from ever, needing it. There's a difference between, all the time, I tell people all the time, I have deep gratitude for surgeons and emergency medicine and everything that we have available in modern medicine to aid and assist bodies. Um, I personally went to the depths of what it meant to quote unquote save a life. And I don't think any human has access to that. And again, something just to go deep into on your own. But again, when it comes to healing, that's the body. That's the body. And you've got to take the little bit of trust you have, and you've got to be the one that grows it into an experience, a lived experience that echoes that in more profound ways, right? Um, and again, that goes through how are you living? Are you living in a way of like everything scares you? You need to check on everything. If you don't have the checkup, you don't know if you're well or not. You need all the lab work to say that you're in the normal range, or
Mhm.
else you don't feel safe. But the second you're a week away from those normal reference ranges, you're afraid again because you feel something, right? So again, we've got to live in a different way. And we've got to have that. It's not blind wishful thinking. And it's definitely not the ignorance of, oh, I'm just going to pretend like I'm not feeling how I feel, or pretend like what's going on in my body is not there, and I'm not going to do anything about it. And I'm going to call that the body only. Again,
Right.
that's not an intelligent way to go about it. So we've got to be very much in the driver's seat of understanding that you and your body should be the only thing that you trust until you've got evidence to prove something else. And you've got the most evidence, literal, tangible evidence that not trusting your body doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. So if you're not trusting your body, you've got to know you're just believing a story that has captured your intellect and captured your emotions. But you believing that story is just, again, you've been captured, you've not been saved. And removing yourself from that, looking at things from a truthful lens. But, I talk about this too. It's so, when you go into this world, what you're going to start finding the second you start approaching these truths is you're going to lose a lot of your false perceptions of safety.
Mm.
Because if the medical industry was what you trusted and not your body, you always have a hospital and you always have a clinic and there's always a million doctors and experts, and it's never on you, right? So there's always a benefit we get from any belief that we continue to choose to believe in. And there's always generally a negative side to everything. So even when you come to terms with, I do trust my body, it's the only logical thing to truly trust in. The only way I make it through any surgery, the only way I have any effect, the only way I experience any pain or pleasure is because this body works, not because it doesn't.
Right.
And then I'm responsible for a portion of what happens in this body, and I'm going to contribute as much as I can. And then there's other things that might be outside of my tangible reach, right? And when you really go down to all of it and what happens in the story and the translation within medicine, is we need something to buffer us from that uncomfortable truth that's actually held within death, right? Because that's going to be everyone's, rebuttal is like, okay, yeah, so I've survived every single day of my life so far, but I'm going to die. Yeah, well, those are two mutually exclusive truths, right? I say it all the time. From what I found, as far as I could go with my own intellect and curiosity and questioning, healing and death touch once.
Mm.
And when I got there, it was kind of like this point of like, your brain's like, well, what do we do with that? Right? But I couldn't find an instance where that wasn't the truth. And again, it's something that I would encourage you to go in on your own. Because again, it makes you see this body very differently. And the other fact and the truth that all humans exist in is the fact that, I'm just as close to death right now as you, and you're just as close to death as everyone listening. And everyone listening is just as close to death as my little niece, and she's just as close to death as my grandmother, and she's just as close to death as somebody that's born right here in this minute. And unfortunately, that's the actual truth, right? And when you go into truth, you get into these uncomfortable places where you have to hold all of this simultaneously and be like, yes, that's true. And with everything we're given, we live. With everything we're given, you know, make each day count as much as you can. And there's also a difference between, running towards life and running away from death, right?
Yes, there is. That's what a lot of people are doing. They're so afraid to die that they're afraid to live, is what I keep saying. Right?
Well, because we've been told that uh,
Yes.
that you can live wrong, or life itself is what's killing you and your body's also killing you. And again, if we could just clean the slate on the stories and just be like, okay, let's all just observe from each of our perspectives. And at the end of each life, let's come to a center clearing. Let's have a conversation about it. And maybe we would understand things differently. But you don't get that clarity unless you do the investigation on your own, right? Just like you don't get the confidence in living this way unless you actually live it.
Right.
Um, and when you live it, I had this beautiful patient where she lived in a certain way and reversed a process that was going on in her liver, and she got the lab testing to prove it. And then she went back to her old way of living, and then it came back. And so without even consulting me, she did everything again, and then it went away again. And then she was like, I think I have to keep living that way. Probably so. And it
Think
was like this
so?
beautiful moment of so much empowerment, though,
Yeah.
because she made that connection. She changed her life, and then her tissues literally followed, right? And that's exactly what your body's doing. And so that's why to have that relationship with it, it wants to save you. It wants to delight you. It wants to inspire you. It wants you to live more. It wants you to feel good things. The reason you have pain receptors is not to hurt yourself more, but to stay away from the things that hurt. And there's this wisdom that, again, if we just simplified it all the way down, how beautiful is it? Like at the end of the day, even when I went into digestion and all of those different factors, the simplicity was a life that was wholeheartedly loved while it was lived. That didn't mean every single day was easy and good and everything always goes your way. No, a life that was wholeheartedly lived and loved, like adored, had the greatest benefit to the tissues.
Mm-hmm.
How beautiful is that? How beautiful is that? And, you know, maybe a good topic to kind of wrap up with is, one of the things that really exploded my brain back when I was actually in the traditional hospital setting, um, was when a body would pass away and, the autopsy showed, they quote unquote died of cancer, but the man was 98 years old. Okay, and
Right.
he had cancer everywhere. So of course he dies of cancer. And then we would have other bodies where we would run all of the diagnostics and that body would pass transition. The labs were perfect. There were no tumors to be found. And I asked the extremely uncomfortable question that day. And I said, so perfect labs actually have nothing to do with a person living.
Wow.
And the doctor just didn't say anything. No, that was my question.
Oh, right.
Having perfect labs
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the person has a better shot of staying alive.
Mm,
Because if so, then the perfect body that we have right here with the perfect labs with no tumors, she should be alive.
mm-hmm.
And that man down there that had tumors everywhere, he shouldn't have been 98, right? No answers. So I
Yeah.
looked for my own, and I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, to look for yours and to actually get down to the truth of what matters in a life. Perfecting a body, removing every scab, removing every blemish, perfecting labs, or living a life where the labs are perfect because the body is in balance, the soul is expressed, the passions are experienced, the life is just vibrating and pulsing through the body that's experiencing it. And we don't have to be perfect, right? That's the other beautiful gift of life. Perfection is a man-made construct. To the body,
Mhm.
there's no moment that's not perfect. Because if you're alive, it did it perfectly, right? Just like when you throw a mouse in a cup of water,
Right.
it's treading water perfectly. How do you know? It's still treading water,
Right.
right? And again, it'll touch that conversation of, okay, then why do we die? And I don't know about you, but I've asked. I don't have answers for that just yet. Um, but it makes this whole thing come full circle. And I think when we actually put it in perspective and with these bigger questions, the poetry, the poetic part of life, the mystery, right? And the other thing I fell in love with is, I don't know about you, but I love like meet cutes and serendipities and cosmic winks and like romance and spontaneous things. My whole body just like explodes with them. And I realized that we apply that everywhere except for within healing. And the mysterious torments us instead of delighting us
Yes.
because we, again, translate what's happening in a very um, antagonistic way. Like it's against me instead of what if this discomfort is pushing me to a point where I have to become a person that I've never been before. And the person that I've never been before actually has impact that actually does something far greater than anything I could have ever done as a different version of me. And this version of me sees more clearly, feels more clearly, speaks more clearly, right? And what if this is the process that brings you to that self that you think you have to search for, right? When can we fall in love with the mystery of maybe it is all for us? And life has this funny way of knowing that if it told us how bad certain chapters would be, we'd never choose to read
Right.
them. Right. So
Yes.
sometimes, just like going to the gym, it's what you go through that gives you the value. But two different people doing the same workout will get two different effects.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with your interpretation. Remember, that's the other word we keep bringing up today. Your interpretation of what you're going through, right? Matters so much. And
Mhm.
so your interpretation of, I would like to even get us all to the point of like, it's not how quickly can we change the tissues to reflect what we want, but how beautifully can we live a life that changes the tissues no matter how long it takes, right? If living's the point, if dancing is the point of the dance, if listening to the song, you don't just start the song to get to the ending.
Yes.
Why do we look at the body and healing as this thing of like, this should only take 2 months?
Oh,
This should only take
oh,
2 weeks. I
yes.
should, after a 6 weeks cleanse, this should be gone,
Right.
right? There's a reason it doesn't work that way. And I think the reason is far greater than anything we could even comprehend at this time with our intellect, because we also have souls on board, spirits on board, ancestors woven into our DNA, so much more we couldn't even pretend to know. And so if we could fall in love with the mystery, not just of healing, but of living, I think we could experience it softer. And when we experience it softer, it's translated and interpreted by our body more beautifully. And then we create a chemistry that contributes to wellness because it is that cause and effect game.
Amazing. And in therein lies the wonder and the curiosity and the imagination. And we talked about the mystery the last time we spoke.
Hmm.
Want to know, they want answers. Like, but the answers we have today are very different than the answers we had 50 years ago. Who says
Exactly.
we're right, even if we think we have the answer?
And that's why we have to be like anytime. I love asking questions. It's always my most favorite thing. I love asking questions. Someday I would get to ask you all the questions. And anytime I meet somebody, I am the one that asks the questions
Right.
because I have this deep curiosity. And anytime I'm given an answer, a younger version of me, the one that just wanted to achieve and download and perform well in school and get the grades and, be that little carbon copy of what helps the system. I would just take the answer for the answer, and that's the answer, and that's forever the answer, and we never question the answer. And now, you have to get into that place, that adaptability, literally, physiologically, emotionally, and mentally, to be able to hear an answer and just take it as a data point. And just like, it's one of those things, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And so anytime an answer is given, I'm always, okay, I'm not going to act like I didn't hear it, or I'm not going to receive the wisdom given to me in this moment. But just like what we've seen when it comes to medicine, a right answer 20 years ago is definitely not the right answer
Right.
now. The right answer 50 years ago is now malpractice. Um, so let's pay attention. But when it comes to your body, when it's hot, it's hot. When it's cold, it's cold. When it feels good, it feels good. When it hurts, it hurts. So again, if we were going to listen to one, which would you choose? And again, when we put it on society, the rules of, think about the deception in the food pyramid, and now we're aware of it, and now we're still following other things that they tell us instead of
Right.
being like, if we were that wrong and it was part of a deceptive process that was well known, um, maybe we, again, take your answers as data points instead of as truths that govern how we think and how we live and how we operate, not just our bodies, but our one life, the only life we get.
The one life. Right.
The
It's worth
one
it.
life,
It's worth
right?
it. Yeah.
And if we could fall in love with that life, like again, I think the process, um, it was always my deepest desire to create even a treatment plan that would make the person not just fall in love with their body, but fall in love with life and fall in love with that deep echo of self. And can you imagine if that was the goal of medicine? If when we saw the tissue speaking, we listened and we said, we need more connection, we need more passion, we need less fear, we need more self-reliance through the work required to develop that. We need a purification of the people around this person. We need a purification of the stories this person tells themselves. Can you imagine the society we'd create if our medicine
It'd be
pushed
amazing.
us into that level of humanity? The cool thing, though, is if you're listening to this, you can start. I know you are doing it in your community. I'm doing it in mine. As much truth as we can um, share. And again, I really think if we could be honest, the lives that we impact are not the ones that just hear our voices, even though I think it's a beautiful avenue, but it's the ones that get to see how we live, right?
Mhm.
Um, when you get to see a person, live in a certain way, you get a little bit of the benefit of watching that. Right. And so even when we're talking about children, I've experienced it even in relationships. In the beginning, their fear was out of control and because they got to watch how I live, right, it conferred a level of safety and confidence and that they didn't necessarily have to quote unquote earn, right?
Right.
Um, but that's also the gift that we live in a way where our message is spread, where we, think about bacteria too. I was researching bacteria, and the second they learn something that would benefit themselves and benefit their kind, they share the information instantaneously,
Mm,
right? And I was
yeah.
like, that's why they're so powerful.
Right.
And that's this true, like if we can actually look at, and again, we won't go into another gigantic topic, but love, right, is taking something as yourself. And if we lived in love, the second we could be something, that had a ripple effect, we would do it, not for self-gain, but just because there was literally no distinction between me and you.
Mm,
If I
mhm.
saw you well, it did good for me, right? And if I see you struggling, it hurts me.
Right.
And can you imagine what that would do eventually, the ripple that would have in a world of war? And, it seems so far away, but there's a knowing in us that knows that again, we start right here. You start in the seat that you're in and the body that you're in. And then if you're lucky enough to have a relationship with anybody, if you're lucky enough to be around a family unit of any kind, um, it's not that we go in and teach, right? I don't know about you, but when I go in and like I'm in preacher mode, I'm like, everybody, I have stuff to say, and we're gonna change everything, and I want you motivated. I love you. I love you so much. Can we all change? They're
Yeah.
like, please go away. But again, the message is not, can we go preach this everywhere?
Yes.
It's, can we live in a way where you can't get us out? Where it's so permanent, it's so profound that then we have a place where questions can be asked. Because I don't know about you, like I have this deep craving in me for like the wisdom of elders and a
Yes,
grandmother. I've always been on this endless
absolutely.
search for this elusive grandmother that I know I'll meet. But then I feel like I collect her. I collect her in poetry. I collect her in silent moments. I collect her in, wisdom of even, doctors that came before, researchers that looked for different things, artists and poets and
Gardeners,
songwriters, right?
gardeners with the old knowingness of how to
Mm-hmm.
work with the land. That's one that I'm
So we just
looking
collect it all back and we become it. And instead of, making everyone start from scratch again, we
at.
should start that, let's hand it down again, not through words and journals, but, again, if you had it in your soul, if I saw my mother live this way, and no matter what a bunch of men ever could say to me, I would never even think to believe it because I lived something entirely different.
Right.
She
Yes.
lived in a way that makes what you're saying untrue, right? And there's this beauty to that too, of like we're part of the becoming or the unbecoming, whichever way you like to look at it, of it's not just we're all doing this all at the same time for a reason. I didn't come into life without quote unquote disease. um,
Mhm.
So there's I joke around, I'm like, we're all in the same class, like in a cute way. Like remember like when you're in elementary and you just couldn't wait to see who was in your class and then junior high. And so we're all in the same class. There's no hierarchy to this. But wherever there can be true wisdom whispered, let's whisper it back in. And I use the word whisper on purpose because again, I think screaming virtue and is starting to be our red flag of maybe there's something else, right? And I think we have to have that discernment moving through this time too of we're not following, nobody's following. Every step you're taking is your step. Um, and so the following really is this internal thing, but how much are you letting it have a say in the direction versus the direction that everyone's like flashing signs and neon signs pointing this way and trying to scare you away from this. But you're always a part of that conversation. We just want your voice louder, right? And the voice is partly coming from your physical body, helping you see what you can't see.
Right.
Um, and the more you fall in love with it, the more you just want to spend time in that relationship. And think of it, I literally think of it as a relationship. It was a relationship
Yeah.
I neglected all the time because, you can go into attachment styles and all the psychology of relationships right now. But it loved me so unconditionally, it was easy for me to look away from it. Why? Because I always knew it was there. Right. And I think part of healing is part of, you know, getting back into that relationship and understanding the value of something that has the purity of the unconditional, because we don't really get to experience that in our human to human relationships just yet. But you have it sitting there right with you in your you and your physical body relationship. It only knows unconditional. It knows nothing else. And when you sit and spend time in that, it really starts changing your perspective naturally and organically. Because when you see that connection, and then you have that, like, just like you would want to be with a lover more and spend more time in the presence of the lover and ask more questions and want to see more and want to know more, you'll start creating that relationship. And then think about a relationship. The more time you spend listening and asking genuine questions instead of just being like, oh, you're so awful and you're always here and you're gross and you're always messing up and you don't look how I want you to look and you don't do anything right and you're not that other person. And then that person's just going to open up everything to you and be
Right.
like, hey, don't do this. Don't do that. No, you've silenced its voice, like through condemnation, judgment, all of these different things. So reestablish that relationship, have the curiosity to be like, no, I want to know why right now you're burning with anger. And I also want to know why I'm smiling about it. And then the next moment, I want to know right now why you're elated,
Mm,
right? And
beautiful.
then I want to know right now what your favorite, you know, smell of a color is. And then what I want to know right now why you feel like running away. I want to know right now why you feel like covering that up. I want to know right now instead of, oh, you must be weak. You're covering that up because you're insecure. Oh, you are so this. That's why you're doing that. No, you have no idea. You haven't even gotten to know the most beautiful relationship that we have, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes we let other relationships make us even further away from that,
Sense.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so for other people, how can we live in a way to always, do our best with what we have, to let other people go through their own process, to help when we can, and also know that sometimes letting people have their own time, place, space, um, is sometimes more helpful than trying to have them go the way we think it should go,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that too, for sure. But what a beautiful way, I think, to end this is because in a time where we're being so led far away from ourselves and that everything is outside of us and that the body is doing something wrong and it's a warring mentality to come back and cultivate that relationship through curiosity and respect and wonder and the desire to put into place what it needs and wants. It's such an important thing, especially at this time where we have we ever been further away from
Yeah.
what how this body actually works and what we
But
don't know the truth.
yeah, and one thing that I would say is usually the opposition increases when they know that their opponent is more powerful or becoming more powerful. So I often look at this time too, like, why are they increasing? They're increasing environmentally, they're increasing psychologically, they're increasing in division, they're increasing because their opponent is so great, not so weak.
Okay.
And so think of that again. It's because it's one of those things where there's this moment in I let myself get really down, at a point in these past 4 years. And there was a moment sitting at the ocean in my car, and I had my kitties with me and my puppy. And I was just sitting there, and I had this like flip in perspective. And it was like if somebody, you know, she was
There's
pretty.
one. Yeah.
If somebody were to come in on this moment and be like, but you have this and this and this and this and this and this. I just wish you could see what you have. And then it was like this whisper in my heart of like, that's exactly what I've wanted to tell so many people. If you only saw who you were, if you only saw what you had,
Mm.
there would be this radical change in you. Hi, baby. She's gonna come back. 1 second, I'm gonna bring her in.
Yep, yep.
But there would be this radical change in you. This sweet baby just woke up.
Oh, so
Um,
cute.
of I don't want to take any of it for granted. Just because, one season went wrong, one relationship wasn't what I thought it was going to be, something didn't turn out how I wanted it to. Something broke my heart. My body had a response I wasn't anticipating.
Mhm.
Something happened. But to zoom out and be like, do you see what all you still have, though? It's yes, and, right? Yes, all of that happened. And you have so much. And so, even in these times where it's like, why is everything increasing? Why is the stress increasing? Why is the fear increasing? Why is the um, turmoil and all of the everything that's so antagonistic to humanity and to kindness and to unity and to love and to me it's like we could look at it from one perspective of like something negative, but I like to look at it because there's the opponent to them, awareness, truth, ability to see through mental manipulation, that's increasing. So of course the opponent would have to increase what they're throwing at it. And so instead of getting, disheartened, see that as like, again, if your coach is getting harder on you, making you lift more, making you learn little tiny things that you never even knew existed. It's not because you're worse, it's because you're better.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
With my patients, I would get harder on the ones that were doing it. Right? And it was often I would pull off a little bit on the ones that were getting overwhelmed. Right?
Yeah.
But the ones that were like head to head with like, I need you to push for 6 more months with an intensity that you haven't done before. It's because I knew that they could get off of the medication in 2 months. Right? I pushed them hard though.
Wow. Yeah.
And so again, to have that level of understanding of you don't go and get super hard on the athlete that's really, really struggling, right? You don't up the
Right.
reps and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. You go to the ones, when they're like, okay, I can handle more. And so right now, I really think everything's increasing because we're increasing our awareness, our ability to be like, okay, so that was a sham. That was untrue. That was deception. That was manipulation. That was smoke and mirrors. And even at the least, I don't know what I believe. That is light years more intimidating to somebody that wants to manipulate and be like, okay, left, right, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And you're just like, okay. So somebody even being like, I don't know if I can trust you, that's intimidating. Somebody that says, I don't trust you, watch out. Somebody that says, I don't trust you, I trust me more, and I don't need anything that you offer. So even that game doesn't work. Terrifying,
Totally.
right? And where are we moving? We're not moving away from that. We're moving into it, a lot of us out of necessity. A lot of it, from what I got to see was mothers protecting their children once they learned something. And then that forced the family unit, and then that forced the community, and then that. So it's this very powerful movement. And again, let's reorient ourselves and be like, if they have to bring in their A team, I promise you it's not because you're the C team. It's because
Yeah.
there's an opponent worthy of the increase in force.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. So that's a very good high note to finish this out. So are you still seeing patients? Are you just doing classes? What's
Right
your,
now, I've tried to distill everything down to where you could navigate yourself out of it, even if I didn't exist. And that's what I've done through my master classes. I've tried to break them down into variables like the digestion variable in the nutrition class, the light, energy is the stress, and just energy management within the body, sleep, and all of those things. Right now, I've paused the one-on-one and trying to rework how we can do that in a way that's sustainable. And as you know, like when you're going against the system, that was another part that I kind of ran into was there was reasons why I wasn't loud.
yes.
And when you have someone being loud in a way where they don't understand things, it didn't compromise them, it compromised me. And so we've had to rework and pause for a time being, and then, but I'm constantly, looking to get back to it in some way. But I truly think that everybody is the doctor that they need, and we all can, I feel like we're all just being like, this is how I did it, and let me help you, just kind of how we do life. And so now that's my contribution, and kind of help people walk through the variables on their own of that practical, and let them handle the poetry. We'll go into it, but that's kind of harder to go into those technical
Yeah,
steps.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so how can they find you? What are the best ways?
So you can still go to my website, gritnaturalmedicine.com, and we'll constantly be updating on that, even if social media goes down for whatever reason. And then I'm on social media. It's going to be confusing for a temporary time. So it's formerly Dr. Cassie Huckaby, but it's soon going to transition into Dr. Cassie Wuthrich. And so those are the two primary places. I have a YouTube with the same Dr. Cassie Wuthrich, and those are the primary places to find me at this time.
Okay. So guys, get on Cassie's Instagram if you haven't yet, because just the motivation and the inspiration that you can get from her messages, from her wisdom, from the stories that she posts, or even just little quotes, is just, it's like a little bit of nutrition for your day to keep you inspired and keep you on the path, especially if you're struggling and you're not trusting it. There is power in working through that and getting to the other side. And people like Dr. Cassie, they're out there to support you and to help you along that way. So please, please, please. And I know this is a lot of it is a long thing, but I know it's so inspiring in a time where it's all about the gadgets and the supplement and the all that stuff. Just this, bringing it back to yourself and
Mm.
how you live your life and what you put into it is just such an important message. So I thank you so much for
So,
choosing me to be the first one
yes,
when
the
you're
first
back
black.
online. I'm so excited to share this with my community because it's an important message to share in these times.
I'm so grateful for the conversation. I think just like you said in the beginning, we didn't plan anything and it's organic, but this is the beauty of life and connection and reconnection. I'm so grateful to reconnect with you in this season.
Both aligned. Okay, everybody, share, share, share far and wide. This is a message that needs to be shared. So thank you so much for joining us. And until next time.